The first thing we wanted to do for this presentation is to sort of step back and set the context for where we've located ourselves within a pretty big question, which is, how do people address legal problems? So, when you have a legal problem, how do you understand your situation, and what steps can you take, and how do people think about that? So, people may think about their legal problems and take action in lots of different ways. So our little diagram is intended to illustrate some of those different ways, and also that it's a kind of dynamic thing, right? You don't, think about your problem and think, oh, I'll go to a lawyer and that will be it. You are often also thinking about action that you can take on your own, or where else you might go for help, or to confer, or to understand your problem. So people might take action on their own by seeking online resources, looking at pamphlets. Many people reach out to a family member or a friend, and they may start to take a step in a legal process, advocating for themselves. People may reach out to a lawyer or paralegal, but we know from research that most people don't turn to lawyers and formal advisors to help them with legal problems. And we know that a lot of people get help from non-legal workers, and these may be people in community organizations or in government offices or other service providers. So to locate our research within this context, our focus has been on the community organization piece. So we've looked at that within this broader context. Because workers in community organizations are often, as you well know, the very first point of contact for people who need legal help, who may not even know that they have a legal problem, and they start to travel that path having made that first contact. So those trusted intermediaries, which is the term that we've been using in our work, between clients and a complex legal system that is often confusing and impenetrable for all kinds of people. Through that relationship, those trusted intermediaries become an ongoing resource and often advocates for their clients as they start to navigate the system. So on the next slide, we have a sort of outline of what our project has focused on. So as I said, we are looking at workers in non-legal community organizations who provide frontline services. So that, for us, has meant nonprofit community organizations whose mission does not include providing legal advice. And as Julie said at the outset, what the Law Foundation wanted in their desire to do this research is a deeper understanding of what trusted intermediaries do, and more about the context of their work. So what training and other strategies are helpful? How do people build their capacity? What works? What kinds of challenges they see? That kind of thing. And what could provide more support so workers can help their clients use the law and really make a difference in their lives. So what we've done in our research, which we started in January, and as Julie said, we're expecting our report will be complete by the end of the year. So we conducted interviews and focus groups. And our focus groups, as many of you know, because you were part of them, have included workers from settlement agencies, the violence against women sector, health workers, LGBT community, multicultural centers, indigenous organizations, employment workers, education advocates, and we also included lawyers and paralegals and community legal workers in legal clinics who often work with workers in organizations that we were focusing on. and also social services agencies. So we conducted a survey as well. We went back and forth about, was it a good idea to do a survey and how do we do that? And luckily we had significant expertise within our group. Not my expertise, that's for sure, but we had very good experience, and we decided we would do a survey, and we did this through using the very gracious help of our contacts in umbrella organizations across Ontario, and we got over 400 responses. So we were absolutely thrilled with that. And over half of the people who responded identified as staff or volunteers in community organizations who provide those direct services. And others were lawyers, paralegals, CLWs in legal clinics, and we also had responses from some researchers and academics. So we also conducted quite an extensive literature review of studies and reports in the area and related areas. So that was both community-based and academic research. We looked at projects that had been conducted and evaluations where of some of those projects and other initiatives. We looked at other jurisdictions, the US, Australia, UK, and a couple of others. And we also looked at different sectors. So we looked at obviously the legal sector, but also health, financial, customer service, housing, and income support. And we also looked at a number of reports on adult education techniques.
Je voulais juste ajouter que nos entrevues, groupes de discussion et de sondage ont été faits à la fois en français et en anglais. Et on a eu une bonne participation quand même en français aussi. Pour ce qui est de la revue de littérature, on a trouvé très peu de documents quand même rédigés en français qui parlaient du sujet. Sauf que ce que j'ai trouvé intéressant, c'est que le terme intermédiaire de confiance était quand même utilisé en français. Donc, un exemple, c'est dans le domaine du transfert des connaissances dans le domaine de la santé. Donc, c'était vraiment au cœur de la même idée, c'est-à-dire que lorsqu'on veut essayer de transmettre l'information à des personnes sur un sujet comme la santé, l'information passe beaucoup mieux lorsqu'elle est présentée par une personne en qui l'auditoire a confiance.
Yeah, and just to sort of continue a bit on what Julie has just offered, but the term trusted intermediaries, it was, as we started to talk to people, people would say, well, I'm not sure I like that label, and others would think that it was quite accurate and was a comfortable description for them. But we did find, and this sort of begins our thoughts about the experience that people bring, there was this incredible excitement from people about talking about this and talking about that relationship, so that it really resonated with people when we started to talk to them that it was important work, it was important to think about it, and to really understand it better. So people were really keen to talk about the role that they played and why it was so important to them to help people find their way in a very complex legal world. So we found that people really bring this huge richness of experience and engagement and incredibly thoughtful perspectives and lots of insight from working with different people in different contexts in a whole lot of different ways. And we did find too that there was a real understanding of the responsibility that comes when people trust you and come to you for help, and how that gives you an obligation to work with them in a way that really connects, and people quickly would talk about how important it was to honor their clients' experience and to understand, what could be done for them, and where they were sort of connecting them forward to get further help. So there was a lot of, we heard a lot about concern about whether they referred them, we'll talk more about this, but whether they referred them to somebody who really would help them, what happened to them after they saw them. Often they saw them again for a number of different reasons, but there was always this concern about trying to make it better. Like how are you helping people to truly access an experience where that justice is achieving for them a personal response to their needs. So people are, again, very eager to participate in training, networking opportunities and partnerships. We saw clearly from the people we talked to that there's a great openness to that, and people do it all the time. Many positive interactions and partnerships with legal clinics. There's a long history of this in Ontario, and it was quite wonderful to hear about how it works in so many different ways, and how relationships that have grown over years have allowed clinics and other organizations to work together in a whole bunch of different ways. And there's still many challenges, and that's part of what we were committed to looking at, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So what does it mean to be a trusted intermediary? So again, that's something that you know. But again, as the first contact, the legal issues may not be at the top of the list when a client comes through the door, or the legal aspects of a problem may not sort of have visibly emerged. But that worker, that somebody contacts in the community organization may be the person who first helps their client to identify those legal issues by asking the right kind of questions to get to the problems underneath. Providing legal information, like what does the law have to do with your situation, to help them understand their rights and what they might do. Referrals, of course, and we'll talk some more about this. Form filling, and this starts to get into the areas that were talked about this morning, about that distinction between legal information and legal advice. But we heard that people in that trusted intermediary role are, completing divorce forms or applications for spousal support. There may be a complaint about employment standards or various other contexts. So that starts to get into that line between assistance and legal advice, and again, we'll talk more about that later. People accompany their clients to legal meetings or to court, and also support them to advocate themselves. So when somebody's going into a legal process on their own, they may find help with their worker. So and again, to think about the importance of the role, people would reflect on that aspect of client trust, and there's a real comfort and consistency about that, like really understanding that it's important for people to see the same person, or to, and they would comment on how if once they've seen the same person a number of times, that trust relationship builds and the ability to help them improves. How important it is to understand clients' needs, and how someone in that community worker role is positioned to understand, the big picture, and to help them, see the legal aspect again within the context of their comprehensive circumstances. Navigating the system, like we know that the legal system is a confusing experience, and bureaucracy is confusing, and legal processes are often very, very difficult to navigate. And a trusted intermediary can complement the role of a lawyer. So, a referral to a lawyer may get them to that lawyer who will help them. And as that relationship materializes, the worker can get the client ready to meet the lawyer. They can gather information. We heard about them helping lawyers understand their circumstances again from that more comprehensive perspective. And then a bit about the challenges that we heard people reflect on, and sometimes talk about sort of a wish list. So there is that knowledge about the law and recognition of legal problems, like how much do you need to know about the law, and how do you learn enough to be able to recognize legal problems and give information effectively. And again, that piece about, I know, which is the focus of the morning here, that legal information versus legal advice. So it was fascinating to us that both community workers who work with people with legal problems and lawyers who see clients who were referred, particularly lawyers in legal clinics, were both very sensitive to the importance of appropriate and good advice that responds to the client's situation, and both were concerned that a client be able to access good advice that was responsive to their situation, and both were very sensitive about being having an understanding of what good advice would mean to that particular client. So there was a lot, people talked a lot about that, and there was a very developed sensitivity to it, which it got us reflecting on that sort of natural tension around that issue, and how people will come about it or come at it from a number of different sides based on their experience. Where do you find good information? We know that there is a lot of very good information available, but that part of connecting people to the information can be a real challenge. So that people know where they can find good information, know enough about that information to gain the confidence to access it, understand how it will inform them for particular clients, and to start to use that kind of information in a dynamic way. And we heard from others in other jurisdictions that is also a challenge in a number of places. So it's an important one to reflect on. How do you sustain knowledge? How do you promote good knowledge for individuals? Like what kind of follow-up training is needed? How regular should it be? What works for different communities? And also how you sustain knowledge within organizations. Because we did hear from people that there is turnover. It's a reality of the sector, and it's a challenge to maintain that knowledge within organizations. Building relationships we heard about aspects of building relationships across the board. And we heard it from organizations, we heard it from individuals, we heard it from the lawyers and others that we talked to. We heard it from the academics. And you know, how that's done, how great it is when it works, and also the challenges of building effective relationships. How do you make a good referral? Well, it's layered, and it can be complicated, and you need to know with confidence who you're referring somebody to in order to think about it as a good referral. And people talk to us about how they had learned over their years of experience often about making a good referral. So people would talk about how perhaps at the beginning when they started as a worker that they would use a list, and they would make phone calls and find an available lawyer for somebody. But over the years, they came to know who was on that list, and they came to be confident that they would know that referring to a particular person for a particular client was a good way to go. So that was interesting. And also, people often talked about the follow-up part. How did it go? What happened? Because people, of course, trusted intermediaries care about what happens a lot. And so there would be a real sensitivity about whether that referral was effective, what happened to the client after they left their office. And people would talk about taking any opportunity they had, if they saw them again, to find out what happened. So sometimes that would happen in a structured way through an evaluation, if there was a project and there was the capacity to look at that outcome. But that wasn't always possible for obvious reasons. And people would talk about it all the time in our various focus groups and in the interviews. The challenges that we have in Ontario with rural and northern communities: transportation, communication, training opportunities, networking opportunities, and then of course resources. What is available to support the work and the connections and the information. So I think Karen's going to add there.
Okay.
Oh, Julie? Okay. Go ahead.
OK. Étant donné nos outils de recherche, on était capable de faire une comparaison pour essayer de voir si la situation des intermédiaires qui travaillent en français est la même que les autres. Et ce qu'on a constaté, c'est qu'en réalité, la plupart du temps, il y avait beaucoup de choses en commun dans leur réalité, leur travail, etc. Par contre, il y a quand même beaucoup de questions d'accès à la justice en français qui sont ressorties, puis aussi, disons, un manque de ressources produites en français qui puissent soutenir les intermédiaires dans leur travail, donc leur donner l'information dont ils ont besoin, et aussi un manque de ressources vers lesquelles ces intermédiaires qui travaillent en français peuvent référer les gens parce qu'il y a moins de services en français. Donc, c'est des grandes problématiques qu'on connaît bien, mais sont ressorties dans la recherche. Par contre, ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y a pas de bonnes ressources qui existent en français. Donc, plusieurs personnes ont nommé des ressources d'information juridique en français et des outils divers. Et une chose qui était assez intéressante dans le sondage, à peu près l'une des seules différences vraiment notoires, c'est que dans le sondage en anglais, on avait à peu près, je crois, 38% des personnes qui ont répondu au sondage en anglais qui disaient qu'ils connaissaient des outils et ressources pour soutenir les intermédiaires de confiance. Par contre, dans le sondage en français, 63%, donc vraiment un plus gros pourcentage, ont dit qu'ils connaissaient des outils et ressources pour soutenir les intermédiaires de confiance. Ça veut dire que peut-être qu'il y a moins de ressources en français, mais il y a une communauté qui connaît ces ressources. Donc ça, c'était une différence intéressante. So just to give you a summary of what I just said, there was an interesting difference in our survey that we noticed between the respondents who responded in English and those who responded in French. And it is that we found that 38% of those who answered the English survey said that they were aware of tools and resources to support trusted intermediaries. But in the French survey, we found that 63% of respondents were aware of tools and resources to support those intermediaries who work in French. So what we felt was that at the same time, our research told us that there are really fewer resources produced in French that can support trusted intermediaries working in that language, except that those that exist, those resources produced, seem to be known by the community who uses them, which is an interesting difference.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go quite quickly over the next couple of slides because I think they're fairly straightforward. We just sort of wanted to lay it out for you because we want to allow some time for questions from the floor. That'll give us about 10 minutes. And then, as Julie said, at least one of us will be at the table at the back for questions throughout the lunchtime. And the break, yeah. And also, any feedback you have, like we're thrilled to be here and to hear from you. So, we heard about what really makes a difference to make this role, to build capacity in the role, and also to provide people with what they need. We heard that relationships were key. We heard that partnership and collaboration was really important to make this a dynamic experience. The organizational buy-in of the trusted intermediary role, we heard some really interesting examples of how that was achieved and what a difference it made. Sharing resources, and also where there are available and affordable resources for referral, whether those are lawyers or other agencies that are going to help the client with their issue. So the next couple of slides sort of characterize what we thought were things. We heard a lot of things that are, people do this work very effectively in many different ways with years and years of experience. So we wanted to underline that. And we've also heard people that, in other areas that may not be as familiar with this kind of work as an ongoing activity, need to hear that there are things that we should keep on doing, and then we are starting to identify areas where we think we could drill down deeper and have a better understanding of what some of the challenges are and some of the what makes something work effectively. So the keep on doings, which are on the current slide 10. Are referrals, facilitating and promoting those relationships, training using lived experience. We heard some interesting examples of this, whether people described how really meaningful it was to work through scenarios, working with workers who have sort of diverse experience in a training environment, and we also heard of a number of examples where people with lived experience are part of the training delivery. Working with those natural tensions between information and legal advice, and also around confidentiality issues. Training for different communities, for different contexts, how important it is to think about that in developing training programs. Linking trusted intermediaries to available information and support tools. We've alluded to the challenges of that. Particularly good online resources, training for skills, substantive knowledge in key areas of law, and also on how to find resources and tools. So that skills training combined with substantive knowledge about the law, and then the practical training about where you find things that are going to help you, and how to use them when you do find them. So drilling down deeper, how do you make good referrals? Like, what does that mean? And what does it take to make a good referral? What are the most effective forms of training? What works for different contexts and why? What works best in online training? Is it best when combined with in-person training in some contexts? I think we're just beginning to understand how online training works and what is effective for different people in different contexts. Making the most of in-person training, how do you do that? How to connect community workers with a wealth of resources so they can use them, right? How to continue to build on legal and non-legal relationships. Again, there's lots of experienced legal clinics working with community workers in a whole bunch of different ways, and how do we continue to build on that and other opportunities for engaging legal support. There's some interesting opportunities emerging through community hub models where multiple services are located in one location, a single location. are there ways that we can build on that? And the range of models for staying on top of what you need to know. So what kind of follow-up training, what kind of regular support, that kind of thing. So finally, community workers can't give legal advice, as we're starting to talk about here, but they provide a lot of help that's needed by people who have legal problems. So that basic legal information about rights and problems, steps to take in resolving a problem, helping with filling in forms, and we're going to talk more about that as the day goes on. So with support, we know community workers can do more in this pivotal role and do it even better. So what do you think?